What's up, YouTube, and welcome back to the channel. I've been messing with this Veloster for the last couple days. I'm pretty close to getting the floor out. This has been a lot more involved than taking the floor out of the Genesis because I'm trying to be a little bit more careful. I don't want to damage any of the sheet metal in case I've got to reuse it, which a lot of this stuff I'm going to have to reuse. But I'm almost to the point where I'm ready to get the floor out. Once I get the floor out, then I'm going to do a comparison of the two floors together. I'll pull the Veloster floor out and I'll set it next to the Genesis floor, take my measurements and figure out where everything's going to line up, and then I'll make my adjustments to the floor for the Genesis, and then I'll try and set it into the vehicle. And hopefully I'll be able to have the floor rough set in here, and if I can get some tack welds in it and shit, then I will I'll put the subframe on it and I'll set the motor in there and check clearances and all that kind of stuff. So we may be able to actually see the engine mounted completely into the car today. It won't stay in the car because obviously I still have to do the rear. But I would like to get the floor in here, get the subframe fit, and get the engine, make sure that nothing's going to interfere with the rain tray or anything like that. So with that being said, I'm going to let you see where I'm at in the car at this point in the video, and then after I pick back up, after showing you that, that'll be the floor coming out. So as of right now, I've got this entire plate is separated. That bolt's just holding it down. This entire front is separated. This is separated. But I've actually decided that I'm going to take this frame rail with this, because it all separates right here. So I'm going to separate it right here, and I'm going to take this entire piece with it. You can see I've got the whole side taken off of it. Everything's separated to here, and then everything is separated up through here. So you can see this is all separated right here. I've got to drill a bunch of spot welds out on this back side, but the entire floor is separated. The entire firewall is separated. You can see there's air gap all the way through the firewall. You can see it's separated over there as well. So I've got the firewall completely separated all the way across. I've got it separated all the way down the side and then all the way down the floor. And I cut this one, and I'm going to cut that one because this plate is so thick, and it's actually holding it'll hold the floor from going down. So I just cut it off so that I can let the floor drop straight down. So I've got all this done. I've got this little bit right here that I have to do the spot weld drill. And then the way that this back end is made, I was going to separate it right here, but there's an additional plate behind here that's underneath here. So I have to take this piece off to get to the piece underneath it. Then I can take the floor out. So I've got all the spot welds drilled out over on that side. I just got to break it loose. But I'm going to work on pulling this out and getting all this separated, and then separating these few right here. And then the only stuff that I have left is the very bottom right here around the bottom. It goes back to about here and then goes up to about here. So I got to drill out probably about 10 or 12 spot welds on this side and on that side. And like I said, this side's completely torn apart the same way. Everything's separated all the way to here. I've got this entire side panel off. I'm going to separate everything right here. This is going to stay with the car. This is going to stay with the car, and this is going to stay with the car. But everything else from here forward and from here to over there is going to get removed. All right, guys, it's Friday afternoon. I just got done removing the floor out of the Veloster, and I've got it sitting over next to the Genesis. I'm going to start doing my measurements, figuring out what modifications I got to do, and I'm going to start trying to test fit the floor into the Veloster. So I'm going to flip the camera around, show you the car with the floor removed, show you the two floor pans sitting next to each other, and what all I need to modify. So here's the Veloster, no floor. When I got down into the corners, the way that the frame rail is, I didn't want to cut into the frame rail, and I didn't want to mess with the nuts for the fender. So I just cut the floor right here along the edge. I did get into the frame rail a little bit. I'm going to weld that up and clean it up after I get this plate off. So I'm still going to remove this plate around down to here, and I'll get it off on both sides, and then I'll fit the floor in here But I left the rain tray and I left the front supports, and then I'll be able to line up the front frame rail or the front supports for the fender and everything off of the front upright that I left on the car. But overall, the floor doesn't look super different. You can obviously see that the firewall is set back about 4 inches, 5 inches. The shock towers do look like they're a little bit taller, but not much, maybe an inch taller. But that could be because the floor is tilted a little bit, because this is not on level ground. The floor is a little bit longer from, if I reference shock tower to the end of the floor, it's about, just eyeballing it, it looks like it's about 2 to 3 inches shorter. I'll get an exact measurement here in a little bit, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to remove material from the back of the floor. I may have to modify how my emergency brake cables come in, because this is where I'm going to shorten the floor, is between here and here. So that's where my length difference that I need to make up is going to come out of. I'll put reinforcements underneath the floor to support it. But yeah, so now I'm going to start taking measurements on width, length, start getting things adjusted to where I need them, and then I'm going to start test fitting the floor. So the floor from the Genesis going into the Veloster is pretty freaking close. There's a little bit of modifications that I'm going to have to do. When you get back into the back here in the corner where that part of the floor needs to go up into there, and on the same side over here, the distance between there is 1 inch narrower than it is up here at the front. So from this front corner to that front corner. But the rest of the floor, so the floor width is the same on the Genesis as it is for the Veloster, except for back there in that back end. So I'm gonna have to cut a 1/2 inch off each side to get it to fit in there. And I'm probably gonna have to, what I'm more than likely gonna do is I'm more than likely gonna cut the floor in the back so that I can set this back so that I don't cut this floor until I get the rear floor removed out of here and I start trying to test fit the Genesis floor. I want to get the front floor completely set into the car, welded in and solid before I remove the rear of the car, because I'm trying to do this without doing a whole lot of bracing on this car. Because of the material that I've left on the car, I haven't done any bracing, because it hasn't flexed at all from my initial measurements until now. And I don't think it's going to flex because of all the rigidity that I have from the windshield, from the rain tray, and then from the frame rails being solid all the way back, and then from the rear floor still being connected, and then the roof and the doors and all that shit still being bolted on. So the rigidity of the structure is still here enough to where I don't need braces. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to trim the back end of this. I'm going to trim about a 1/2 inch off of there, off of each side. And then I'll taper it. I'll probably have to taper it up to that first post right there on both sides. Probably about, I'll have to start out in a 1/2 inch shorter and then get up to where I'm nothing short when I get to that post. And then up here in the front, I've already had to trim. Ow! Oh, that hurt. I just hit my shin on the frame rail. Oh! But there was a tab that was going from here to here that was sitting out. So it was about a 1/2 inch sitting out this way. Cut that tab off because this is actually going to sit flush against inside of here. What I am going to do, I wound up having to cut the corner off of this right here. So that was sitting on there like that. I cut that off. What I'm going to wind up doing, I'm still probably going to have to trim this more, so I haven't made a plate to go on here. But what I'm eventually going to do is I'm going to weld a plate here and then weld it to the side of the car here so that I have that structural rigidity back from the Genesis. This I'm going to have to, I believe I'm going to have to cut this back to where it's flush and then cut this back a little bit. And then I'm going to roll this entire edge in. I'm not going to cut it. I'm going to bang it in with a hammer until I can get it to sit in to where it'll fit inside of here. I want to try and leave as much material on here as I can, and then I'll cut it. Once I get the floor fit, I'll cut it to the shape of the wall, and I'll bang it out until it gets flush with the wall, and then I'll weld it in. Still the biggest obstacle that I'm seeing as far as the fitment of this floor is going to be where the firewall mounts up to the top of the firewall from the Veloster, because the windshield shape's different, and because the firewall is not as tall as the Veloster was. But I'll get to that when I get to it. So first things first, I'm going to do those trims, and then I'll try and get the floor set up in here. All right, so I'm starting to test fit the floor, and you can see that side the rails are up on the floor. This side they're up underneath about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna have to take about an 1/8 inch off of each side to shrink it up so that it'll fit up in here. Once I do that, I should be able to push it right on up in, and I might be able to throw a couple tack welds in here. It depends on how it fits, but it looks like it's gonna fit pretty decent. So we'll see how it goes. So this floor is proving to be a pain in the ass to fit into this car. I've got a lot of it fitting. I've got the whole thing shrunk up to where it's narrow enough to fit inside the frame rails. But up here at the front of the firewall, so in that corner and in this corner, it's still a little too wide. So I got to knock that in and get it to shrink in a little bit. I may even have to cut some of that corner to get it to shrink in. And then I should be able to slide the floor in here. So hopefully I'll have the floor in here in maybe another hour and a half. At least set in place. It won't be welded in, but it'll at least be set completely in. I'll be able to see everything that I need to cut, flatten out, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, hopefully within the hour I'll have it sitting in here where it belongs. So I've almost got it fitting. I got to go back probably another 3 to 4 inches, and everything looks like it's lining up pretty decent in here. I knew I was going to have to modify the crap out of this up here and over here on this side, just because of the way that I'm having to do the firewall. I'll deal with that once I get the bottom of the floor welded in where it belongs. But I'm hitting this back panel. So the rear panel that goes over top the gas tank, I'm actually hitting the frame rails now. I'm back as far as I can go, so I'm gonna have to chop this off before I can put the floor all the way in here. All right, so I've got the floor pretty close to where it's gonna go. I still need to go back a little bit further, but I had a little unfortunate incident with the grinder. I was using it and the damn thing started smoking, and then it started blowing flames out of the top of it. So had to put that down, and now I don't have a grinder until I go buy another one. And the floor still needs to go back, and I'm still hitting back here. I only cut 3 inches off of there. And the floor is actually hitting right there. So I cut 3 inches off of it. I'm gonna have to cut some more off of it. But the shock towers are pretty close. Still got to go back about another inch. Everything's looking like it's going to work pretty good. So yeah, you can see here it needs to go back about another inch. I was able to get the seams sitting a little bit better across the floor. It looks like what I might wind up doing here in this corner is actually cutting that metal and have it fold out the other way. And then I'll be able to weld it up inside of here, and I'll be able to keep all my ports from the Veloster stock. I'll probably have to chop this panel off right here so that I can leave all that exposed, and I'll just weld it straight to the door frame. And then that back panel I'll weld to that panel. And then it looks the same over there. It looks like everything's going to work out pretty good. So like I say, I got to cut a couple more inches off of the back here to get the floor to slide back where I want it. Then I'll be able to mark everything on the front. Then I'll have to pull the floor back out, make my modifications to the front end up here where I'm going to weld it, and get all that squared away. Then I'll be able to set the floor back in there and get a couple tack welds in here. It does not look like I'm going to be able to get this welded in by the end of today. just because I've got to go to Harbor Freight or to Home Depot or wherever and get another grinder. And then I still have to do all the modifications to that before I can weld it in. So chances of me getting this welded in today are very slim, but I'm still gonna try. So I've been working pretty hard on this thing, and unfortunately it does not look like I'm gonna be able to get it all the way welded in today. I went and got a grinder, and there's still a lot of fab work that has to be done, and molding this floor pan to fit the Veloster before I throw any tack welds on it. So I'm probably going to end the video here. The next video, I should have the floor welded in. I'll get the subframe bolted in to make sure all that's going to fit. And I mean, which obviously it will, because it's the original floor. But I want to see how it's going to interfere with the rain tray for the windshield wipers. I may have to do some modifications to that. Right now, really all I'm going to do is I'm going to weld in the sides of the floor along the doors. And I'm not going to weld in the firewall or the shock towers or any of that yet until I figure out exactly what my end result is going to be with this, because I may trim and modify. I honestly don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet. I'm still trying to figure all that out. But once I get the sides of the floor welded in, and I get the shock towers welded in, and get all that stuff permanently set, then I'll start working on the firewall, and I'll put the subframe in here and get the engine in here and make sure all that's going to be square away and no issues. So, like always, if you like what you saw in this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let your friends see what I'm doing, and hopefully I can make a whole lot of progress in the next video. Because once this floor is welded in, I can bolt in the entire subframe, engine. I can start fitting the front end back onto the car, and trying to get all that to where it's working. Because what my plan is now is I'm planning on getting the entire front end completely finished. Now, obviously, the whole car is going to have to be painted after I get all this done. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld everything together. I'm going to primer it and get it to where it won't rust. I'm going to finish building the car and make sure everything's going to function the way that I want it to. Once I make sure that the car is functioning the way that I want it to, then I'm going to tear it apart. I'm going to sandblast the whole freaking car. I'm going to strip all the glass, the weather stripping. It's going to be stripped down to absolutely nothing. Sandblast the entire car, paint the entire car from the inside out, and then reassemble it. That's the only way that I'm going to be able to ensure that there's not going to be any rust issues or anything like that. So that's the process that I'm looking at doing currently. That could change, depend on money or time or whatever, but as it stands right now, I think that is my best case scenario for avoiding any kind of rust issues with this thing in the future. Because I'm not going to be able to get good paint on it with all this undercoating and old paint and all that on here. I need to have fresh, clean surfaces, which I ground down everywhere that I'm going to weld, so that I can get good penetration and good stick through the weld. But once I get done welding it, I'm going to be able to paint where my welds are, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get good coverage everywhere. So I think my best solution for that is to build the car, strip it after I work all the bugs out of it, make sure everything's going to work, and then spray the whole car and then reassemble it. So it's a lot of freaking work to do it like that, but I generally like doing that so that I can work out any bugs before I do the final product. I always like to pre-assemble everything and get it actually running and driving and moving on its own power and everything before I strip it down and do the final paint job. Because if I got to modify shit, I don't want to have fresh paint on here and then I got to grind it down and then I got to go get it repainted anyway. So I'm going to leave it rough until it's completely finished, and then I'll strip it down and paint the whole thing all at once. So, but anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Have a great one.